Hello, my name is Reid. I'm the editor and publisher of the EdisonReport, which is delighted to co-sponsor the National Lighting Bureau's annual Lighting Forum. We're here at the studios of the forum's other co-sponsor, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, where I am moderating 6 panel discussions. This panel is titled The Well Building Standard. Our panelists are Deborah Burnett of the Benya Burnett Consultancy, Jim Benya, also of the Benya Burnett Consultancy, and Dr. Susan Chung of the American Society of Interior Designers. Welcome. Jim, we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit from a lighting perspective, what is the well building standard, and contrast it, if you will, to the LEED standards.
Okay, good morning, Randy. I think the first thing to say about the well building standard is its overall concept is more or less about lighting quality, but certain qualitative values. So LEED heavily emphasizes energy efficiency, number one. That's where most of your points in LEED are regarding a good LEED project. And there are points also in LEED for access to daylight and access to views. The last LEED area is controllability of light, so that people can actually control their own lights. WELL's entirely different in many ways. They're similar in that they, first and foremost, I think, reinforce the importance of daylight and views, and I think that's great. But then WELL gets into literally how well does the lighting perform according to a series of metrics. In other words, is there enough illumination on the task? Is there enough vertical illumination that is a melanoptic benefit at the eye, and things like that. So it's much more measurement-oriented, field measurement, than LEED is. And so the fact that whatever you design is going to get measured, hopefully, and come up with the right values, is a big significant difference between the two.
Susan, if you'll explain a little bit about the role that ASID plays with architects, engineers, and designers, and your CEO, I believe, Randy Pfizer, and why he chose to go after both the platinum for well building and platinum for LEED for your new headquarters.
Sure. So the American Society of Interior Designers is the largest and the only multidisciplinary interior design association in the North America. We are proud to have our office space to be exemplary of the industry. We represent interior designers, interior design students, architects, also manufacturers and suppliers for the interior design industry, and really looked at our corporate headquarters to be the space that really supports all that is part of the industry. In doing so, we looked at the standards that were out there for interior design, interior environments, and really wanted to shoot for the highest goal. Our CEO, Randy Pfizer, had set up 3 core pillars in the industry and for our association, one being sustainability, the other being health and wellness, and the third being resiliency. Having those 3 core pillars for our association, we really wanted to make sure that the office space really incorporated all of those aspects. In doing so, we really wanted to achieve employee health and wellness, so not just showing that in our office, but also being a workplace for our employees, advocating for that. And to do that, we looked at the existing guidelines out there. So LEED standards being one of them, and then the well building standards being the other. We shooted for double platinum,
Right.
and we achieved both, so the first in the world.
Right, congratulations.
Thank you very much. We're very proud of it. And to achieve both of them was to really look at this from one, we wanted this to be the best place possible for our employees and for the entire industry, but also looking at our office to be the workplace of the future, So looking at the longevity of it, so making sure that we had all of the standards incorporated, not just for now, but for the future ahead of us. And also for that was to get third-party validation. So rather than just saying that this was a sustainable, healthy environment, we wanted those standards to validate that this was definitely that.
All right, thank you. Jim, what were some of the challenges you experienced in conducting the lighting design?
I'd say, first of all, understanding well and figuring out a strategy to do that. And I was, of course, we're very fortunate that my partner Deborah is as knowledgeable as she is, and made it a whole heck of a lot easier for us. And frankly, I think a lot of lighting designers, architects, engineers, and others who are attempting to do this may not have access to that wealth of information. It may make it a little bit harder. But getting down to literally the problems, problem number one is the building. ASID is a tenant in a conventional office building. And you know, when you're stuck with a ceiling that's, you can't even make 9 feet, and you're stuck with the windows, and you're stuck with the solar orientation, and you're kind of stuck with everything. For example, we talked about having top daylighting, which is a beautiful way to introduce daylight to a space, but you can't cut a hole in the roof of a building, you know, just any old building. So you have to work with what you've got. And many sites we could have had would have been far worse. We got very fortunate with having north-facing windows primarily, and very tall ones, and relatively high window-wall ratio. So that made the ability to provide natural light in the space that was comfortable and easy on the eyes a big part of the solution. And I want to say that not everybody's going to get it that easy, and that's a big challenge for, I think, the WELL standard, because you know, it's one standard fits all, but not all buildings are going to fit the standard. After that, you know, the next challenge, of course, is going to be budget. I don't think many clients budgets are aware of the implications of cost when you try to do advanced technologies. So, for instance, one of the solutions we used was a solution of white light color tuning in a sort. At the time we did the design, though, we initially looked at that using solid state lighting. We ended up using fluorescent, primarily because of the comparative cost of fluorescent and high color quality at the same time. Fluorescent, even dimmable fluorescent, was significantly lower cost. Now that's going to improve with time, and I think in the future projects will be a lot easier. So we had to mix technologies. And of course the third thing really is lighting controls play a huge role in making projects like this work. We're going to harvest all the daylighting we can. We're going to try and create really two different scenes. There's a day scene, there's a night scene, the transition between them. Deborah developed the program upon which these things would occur so that they follow a plan that she set out for protection of the circadian environment. And so the things that you know, made it harder, of course, the biggest challenge of all was cost. And we were fortunately able to participate in the value engineering and cut the cost in half and still preserve almost every feature we originally wanted, but that was not easy. And so I hasten to point out to anybody starting one of these projects, start out with a healthy budget, otherwise it's going to be real hard.
Right. Deborah, given the client's requirement for a design that is WELL Building Platinum as well as LEED Platinum, how did this influence your approach through the schematics and through the design?
Oh, tremendously. Because of the fact that we understood that we were dealing with an exemplary project here, but more importantly, we were dealing with lives. because the way that science and medicine has been unfolding at a breakneck speed over the last several years in terms of how we understand light to be an instrument of biological stimulation within the body, we knew that what we were going to be specifying and recommending for ASID and the occupants of the space were going to impact not only their work life, but their after work life, and more importantly, their sleep at night. And so we took it upon ourselves to develop the protocol that hopefully will become a beginning benchmark for all lighting specifiers in the future, to understand that the responsibility lies more than just in lighting specification for visual acuity.
So this gets into the whole bioethics thing of the circadian stimulation.
Oh, yeah.
How did you approach that?
Well, we approached it very uniquely. We looked at the entirety of the WELL standard, which is more than just lighting criteria. It involves nutrition, comfort, air, temperature, and a host of other things. And we interpreted that in a lighting perspective. And once we understood, we then took the overall project and our deliverables to be a three-legged approach. Number one, we looked at our objectives differently than a traditional lighting design. Number two, we looked at it through the eyes of a totally different approach to this project. Sure, we did not discount visual acuity, but we put more store in circadian protection of the occupants. And number three, our strategy. Totally unlike, and you'll see in a second when I pull up some slides, totally unlike anything that the lighting design community has ever seen, because this project was worth it. It really was. So I have some slides, so
Okay,
let's take
please.
a look. So in designing our objectives, we had to look beyond just visual acuity, as I mentioned before, and really go into the medical. The medical perspective, the biological perspective, if you would, is how this light that we specify is going to impact the lives of everyone in the space. And our first tenet was, borrowed from medicine. First, do no harm.
Right.
That's the key component. The second, we concentrated on the occupant's sleep. What can we do as lighting specifiers to enable the occupants to get a better sleep at night? And you'll find in the next set of slides why sleep really starts during the day, and the light that they receive in the office is going to determine how well they sleep at night. And the third is the horticultural lighting, because one of the tenets of the overall WELL standard is for nutrition. And so ASID, with Susan and Randy and the others, decided to go a biophilic approach and bring in the nutrition right there at the fingertips, literally, of the occupants by installing herbs and vegetables. And so you can see in some of the photographs, they play a prominent role in the overall design. The next is our approach. It was totally different. We prioritized from the circadian perspective. Bright light during the day, minimizing LAN, light at night. We incorporated outside-the-box programming, questions, and data collection. And you'll be surprised to learn what questions we did ask. And stakeholder and occupant buy-in and permission, that was key in order to protect the occupants and, quite frankly, our practice.
Right.
Because we wanted to get the occupants to understand that the light is now understood in the scientific and medical community as a biological stimulant. So as such, we were experimenting with their lives and their workplace life. And so in order to do that, we had to find out a little bit more about the occupants. What was the general lifestyle? And we did this with surveys and educational seminars, direct seminars where Jim and I flew out to Washington and actually conducted seminars with all the occupants of the space. And we had direct involvement in the commissioning process. We were there the day that the HVAC and the lighting was actually commissioned.
How many occupants?
At the point that we were involved, it was under 40 occupants. So again, as Jim said, we were really lucky on this space because it was a small space. It was about under 10,000 square feet. But the key thing is we had a willing occupant base, both the employees and the entire C-suite staff. And the third leg was our strategy. We used the collected data to determine our lighting design instead of just looking at the book or going to IES standards. Sure, we involved that, but we looked at the occupants, their biology instead. We totally eliminated dependence on CCT and CRI. Instead, we focused on SPD, spectral power distribution, and R9. We wanted to achieve not only the greater than 50 that the WELL standard demands, but we really wanted to ensure that the occupants were receiving the best quality of light, both from the daylight as well as the electric light that we could possibly specify for them. And we didn't rule out legacy sources. As Jim had said, we utilized fluorescent sources in conjunction with LEDs to be able to stay within budget, keep a sustainability as one of the legs that Susan had mentioned that she prioritized, and keep it within our strategy. And so we examined all light contribution, but the big thing, we didn't back down during the VE process, the value engineering. Because at one point, controls were cut out and a number of other things, and I remember writing several letters to Randy and the crew saying, we must keep this in for the benefit and the biological protection of your occupants.
Well, it sounds fascinating. And Susan, let me ask you, other than having this very aesthetically pleasing environment to work, what are some of the wellness benefits that you and your team are seeing post-occupancy?
Sure. So we've just finished our post-occupancy study over the summer, and it's been a year-long process. We have research partners such as Cornell University, Delos has been part of it.
Right.
Also the Innovative Workplace Institute with their captive worksheet have been partners in the research. For that, we've been finding a lot of wellness benefits overall. Our mental and physical health has improved over time, and the wellness part isn't just about the physical and the mental, but we're also seeing benefits for learning, as Deborah had mentioned. Both Deborah and Jim coming in to educate our employees of it. We're hearing that they have a better understanding of circadian lighting, better understanding of biophilic design, better understanding of just health and wellness and how that is impacted from the interior environment. So we're seeing that learning component to be beneficial, not just in the workplace life, but also in their personal lives as well. So post-occupancy, we're seeing improvements overall, not just within the environment, but with our employee wellness and with our performance.
Okay, and are you able to measure productivity?
Right now, most of it is self-reported data through surveys. The captive worksheet that we've been working with one of our research partners gets into more of the organizational data, so how much innovation has happened, and that's through recognition through awards or through other innovative processes. So we are kind of looking at other metrics, not just the self-reported data by the employees, but others to kind of help measure or understand what productivity is.
So we're hearing productivity, we're talking about bioethics. How does all this have to do with lighting? What does it have to do with lighting?
Oh, that's the amazing part, Randy, because science and medicine are now working together with design to enable us to have a completely different palette and approach. So again, I'm going to pull up some slides and so we can take a look at this. Plus, give you and our viewers the opportunity to see some more really great shots of the project that's now first double platinum LEED and WELL in the world. As you can see, it's a very open concept lighting plan that we designed to work with the open concept of the office arrangement. There are no assigned desks and everyone is free to move about, and we've taken every advantage of the available daylight that we had. But from a bioethical responsibility aspect, our overall arching goal was to first do no harm, which is a legal tenet, and it's based upon the precautionary principle of risk management. Haven't you ever gone through the McDonald's drive-in window and you see the signs posted, "We do not use peanuts, but we may use peanuts here," and so it's a warning. And so that's what first do no harm is. And now that we understand light as a biological stimulant, our theory and a number of other practitioners are starting to understand that lighting designers, specifiers, and manufacturers may need to do the same thing, especially when you realize that there's no definitive body of knowledge when it comes to circadian lighting, no set of ethical standards yet, and no guidance from our IES, CIE, or other technical bodies. So the precautionary principle states that when there is a decision to be made, And taking a particular course of action when there's not extensive background support or scientific knowledge, that matter's lacking, and we can be opening ourselves up for potential legal litigation and concern. So let's look at why. Well, the circadian system. Everyone seems to think, ooh, what's the circadian system? Is it the circadian rhythm, or what is it? Well, in essence, it's a biological operating system, and it's in every cell throughout the entire body and brain. And the responsibility is that it anticipates and monitors. And without this, our body programming, just like the timing mechanism in your car, would be off. And it's a biological response. And it happens, the circadian rhythm, to be a 24.2-hour rhythm that cycles throughout the daily and seasonal cycle with the Earth's rotation of 24 hours. And it has to be reset at least twice a day. And light is the primary determining factor, along with temperature and feeding times. And these three objects here literally were involved in the overall development of the Wells standard. So when we're talking about the circadian system, it's not just about the rhythm or sleep. It's controlling and determining our heartbeat and our blood pressure, our wound healing response, immune, muscle coordination, hormonal regulation, metabolic functioning, and of course the circadian rhythm is part of the circadian system, as well as the sleep-wake cycle. Now earlier Susan was explaining about productivity. And you see, productivity can be measured in terms of occupant and employee sleep. This is where we get the information that we're using so freely and assigning to circadian system without really understanding the tenet of sleep. Because we can see that productivity, and this is a recent study that shows that $1,967 per employee per year can be saved by simply allowing the occupants to gain 1 more hour of sleep. And in order to do that, we need bright light during the day and darkness at night. Fatigue, another problem, particularly in industries and also night shift workers. 38% of all U.S. workers are reporting, self-reporting fatigue, and errors and accidents, 43% are serious, and that costs the U.S. $31.1 billion annually. So let's look at light. Let's look at this light differently, other than just something that we see by. It's a biological stimulant. So as we're looking at what we seem to perceive as color changes, the body is actually looking at light protocols, qualities of light almost. We're looking at the intensity, not the intensity of what we perceive the light to be, but how much energy is contained. The timing, when does this light appear? When does the energy ratios change and what balance? The duration, how long and how quickly the shift in light takes over the course of the day. The location, the spectral distribution, and the location of that light when the spectral power distribution changes. In reality, when you actually measure the moonlight itself, the SPD is heavily weighted in the long wavelengths and very minimal amount of blue wavelength energy, less than 12% to be specific. So what we think we see is not what the body receives. So circadian system is totally different. And it goes for the same way with sleep. Sleep is a biological process that starts about 2 hours before you even wake up in the morning so that the active sleep can happen at night. It's dependent upon our endocrine response, particularly melatonin, serotonin, and cortisol, and it's not getting enough bright light during the day that hinders the sleep process. And consequently, bright light at night negatively impacts the sleep act and the neurohormonal response. Here's a graphic I put together to help explain this. So we have light, and the Earth's going around, and of course we perceive the light to be changing. Well, something is paying attention, and it's over 51% of our genes. These are regulatory genes, and they are picking up the signals through specific clock genes, BMAL1, PIR, and clock, that are literally paying attention. When these genes turn on and off accordingly, they will send signals to the neurotransmitters and the hormones located throughout the body and brain to be able to then set into motion another set of genes, which then determines our wakes and sleep cycle. So as you can see, Randy, we're dealing with more than just lighting specifications. We're dealing with people's lives, and thus our concern for first do no harm and our overall arching belief in bioethical responsibility.
And I want to be clear, you're not doing any circadian stimulation. You're doing circadian protection.
Yes, definitely. The two are not related because we do not have enough scientific nor medical established protocols yet to be able to stimulate on demand a circadian system. Otherwise, we're getting into the potential realm of practicing medicine without a license.
Jim?
Yeah, one of the things that this project's, one of its greatest qualities is it's a relatively shallow space from window curtain wall into the core area. That's actually a very healthy concept, both in the well standard, but I think overall in a well building. A well building gives people access to light, and those are a couple of points in the well building system. But you have the ability, if you're working at ASID and you're moving about the office, you're constantly exposed to natural light and view. And I think this is one of the reasons why you're getting such great results, Susan, is that the space is ultimately connects people with the outdoors. And I think that's something we've lost in a lot of architecture over the last, several hundred years, I guess. When you're indoors, you're really indoors. And if we could be more outdoors when we're indoors, I think that's one of the things that makes this space very successful.
Well, congratulations again on the double platinum, and thank you for taking the time to explain the well building process to our audience, because to my knowledge this is one of the first panel discussions involving lighting with well building. So thank you very much.